Now I'm going to give you a taste of a disruptive question that you can use instead of these boring cliche questions. That I'm going to play you a real life customer answering that very question. Here's how I ask it in a conversation when I do customer discovery. So what do you think is the top priority or challenge your board is focused on for the next 6 to 12 months? In other words, if I was a fly on the wall in the board meeting, or if I could sneak in and listen, what do you think they'd be talking about? What's the top priority or challenge focused on right now? So before I play you this real life customer clip, I want to explain to you the importance and significance of this question and why it is the very first question I often ask in discovery conversations with customers and what I teach other people to do. Number one, it's such a distinctive question from their perspective. You're not starting by asking about me, our product, our product, our product. You're asking about something real that goes on in their world. Now you could substitute, instead of board meeting, you could say executive leadership meeting, you could say all hands meeting. The point is, it's something that really happens on their end, and they often have insights into what are the company's priorities that filter down from those board or executive leadership or all hands meetings. So right off the bat, you're disarming the customer by signaling you're not just interested in your own agenda, you're asking about them. There's no mistaking this question as a powerful, inquisitive way of understanding what's going on in their world. Number two, the other reason I asked this question early in the conversation is the best companies in the world are great at positioning the value of their solution, their product or service, to align with something that's really important to the company, not just the user, not just the customer, the buyer, or even the economic buyer, but to the company. Because then it matters a whole lot less if your day-to-day contact leaves, if the user leaves, if the champion leaves or moves on to another role, because you're connecting explicitly to something that's important to the company. So even if the answer to this board question doesn't directly relate to your product or service's value, that's okay, because there may be a connective answer in between, the next level of more departmental challenge or organizational challenge below the board or executive level that you can connect the value to. So now I'm going to play this clip and I want you to listen. Here we go. I'm going to go up to kind of the 30 or even 50,000 foot level for a moment. So if I could sneak into a board meeting there or the senior leadership meeting, what do you think is the biggest priority or challenge that's being discussed at the board level for the next 6 months to a year?
I think the biggest challenge that would be discussed during board meetings would be, so I think you might be aware over the last year or two, Apple made some serious changes to their privacy laws with the iOS 14 update, I believe it was, and that has had a massive impact on digital marketers and customer acquisition. The cost of customer acquisition is much higher. It's harder to track, what customers are looking at from a data and privacy and cookie standpoint. And with that, it's been a big challenge for us, and I think a lot of direct-to-consumer brands, because it just makes it that much more difficult and expensive to acquire new customers. And I know that's been a large point of emphasis, not only in recent times, but dating back to last year, is, hey, how do we, as a brand that has had great success using the social media model in terms of like ad spend and acquiring customers through that method, how do we pivot and how do we adjust to acquiring these new customers, given that, with that privacy change, things really flipped upside down and has made it a lot more difficult and expensive for brands like ours to acquire these new customers. So I could almost tell you with certainty, if you were to be in a board meeting, that would be something that is discussed is, hey, how do we overcome this challenge and identify new ways to, acquire customers and just be a healthy business?
So let me just touch on a few things you might be thinking right now. Number one, this was not a setup. It was not a staged call. This was a regular customer discovery call that I had on behalf of one of my clients, and you're hearing from their customer. So this is my client's customer you're hearing from. Number two, you might be thinking, well, you picked the most amazing answer you could get. It's so rich. No, I picked a pretty typical answer. This is the kind of thing you hear often when you talk to your customers. And you might also be thinking, well, this guy must be an executive vice president. Nope. Director/VP level. It doesn't have any particular insight into board meetings. is just someone who pays attention. And again, many companies these days are doing a better job of filtering the top company priorities into the organization and communicating that. Now let's talk about a few things that you might have observed. I hope you observed. If not, I'm happy to point them out. Number one, you may have noticed that the entire clip was about 1 minute and 45 seconds. So if it took me 10 seconds to ask the question, his answer was almost 1.5 minutes long. So there's leverage there. What I want you to think of as leverage is the questions are powerful. This is so important that just by asking a question that takes 10 or 15 seconds, you can get an additional 1 minute to 1.5 minutes of insight. So the ratio there is important to look at, because we always want, in this type of conversation, this discovery mode, we want customers to be talking at least 3 times as much as we're talking, because we can't listen better, after all, if they're not talking and opening up more. My experience is that when you get really good at discovery and listening and asking the right questions, customers will talk 70, 75%, even up to 80 or 85% of these conversations. Now let's talk about the substance of what this person said. So I will tell you that this is someone who is in charge of customer support for a direct-to-consumer brand, happens to be a company in the consumer market that sells primarily online. When he talked about the Apple privacy tracking, it was really important, because what he was basically saying is the data that we're able to get reduces the accuracy of our targeting, which reduces the effectiveness of our advertising spend, which is a huge driver of our sales. And so that has all impacted us at the top line and the bottom line. So he didn't say they were struggling, but he said they're having to figure that out. And that's impacting a lot of companies right now. The fascinating thing is, so I presented this and a series of clips from this very same conversation to a customer success team for my client in New York City, a team of about 30 customer success managers. I said, you've heard the clip. Did you understand what he was saying? Yeah, we think so. Okay, well, everyone understood what he was saying about the Apple privacy tracking, right? And I got a lot of blank stares. And I said, well, you know that Apple changed the permissions for users to be able to be tracked and to share data, and they still kind of blank stares. So finally I said, you know how when you get a new app and you open it up and it says, ask app not to track across other apps? They said, oh yeah. I said, well, all of this company's customers are being asked that, and they're all declining to track. So this company, your customer, is not getting as much good data as they used to. And they all went, oh. The reason that's so important is they need to understand the big challenges that all of their customers are facing. And this Apple privacy tracking change had a huge impact across a huge chunk of my clients' customer base. So they really should know. Okay, so they didn't know when I was talking to them, but what do we do about that? Well, I suggested that they had this particular client come in and do, I called it a customer reality brown bag session, where he talks about the issues surrounding the Apple privacy tracking, not in detail, but the impact, the problem that that is causing for direct-to-consumer companies like this. So it was a very eye-opening experience for me, for the team leader who brought me in, and for the team themselves, to really try and stay in tune with the big challenges that their customers are experiencing. And in particular, okay, so if you didn't know about Apple privacy tracking changes, fine. But if you hear this from a customer, bring it to your next team meeting, whether it's account management, sales, customer success, and say, I heard this, it sounds like a big deal. Are other people hearing this? And I guarantee you'll get hands raised, and then you'll say, what do we do with this information? We need to share it with marketing. We need to share it with product. We need to share it with our sales team. It becomes very important. So that's a great sort of first example of this radically authentic discovery approach, because it involves asking a disruptive question, getting the customer to open up, identifying a big problem, because remember, customers don't obsess about our product. They're obsessed with their own problems, priorities, and perceptions of trying to get their job done. So this is a great example of all that, and also open up an opportunity for my client to really educate their team on the realities that their customers are facing.